Hello, everyone. Good morning, at least to those from the West Coast. I know how you feel. The 3 hours time difference quite a bit, even though originally I'm from Europe. Time differences are a big subject for me. I want to talk to you about a little bit how Deutsche Telekom handles the topic of partnering. And with that, I mean really open innovation, which became one of 4 pillars in our corporate strategy. And we developed what we call a partnering blueprint for this. I hope that's interesting for you. For those who don't know Deutsche Telekom, we're like the leading European telco operator. 73 billion in revenues, quite sizable group. We also have a system integrator. Our brand is T-Mobile. We have a 66% stake also here in the US operation. My group is really doing responsible for the open innovation, so for partnering. And that means identifying relevant innovation, partners, startups, to bridge the gap between, more a legacy business and, the constant brutal pace of innovation that we are confronted with in the market. I agree with everything Anand says, not with the notion of European companies being complacent. I have to look this up. That's, I don't think, what we are in Europe. It's more, the market is brutally fragmented. Today it's all about scaling. And if you imagine you drive 2 hours with a car and it's a different language, different regulation, et cetera, that's complicated. And I think the other thing is, that's the biggest difference, is that we are very, rather risk averse, unfortunately. So, rich people invest in real estate, which actually is like real brick houses, not like cardboards. But nonetheless, this is what we're used to. That's what we invest in rather than, ventures and long-term. And that's also what we kind of represent a little bit in shareholders' portfolios. So there's a little bit more complexity to that. And so I wouldn't call it complacent. We're well aware that there's a lot of speed going on here in the US, and there's a lot of speed, obviously, in Asia. And Europe needs to watch out that we are not get squeezed there. But that's a different topic. I want to talk to you not about me. So I was a strategy consultant, and I was really more in this operational line of management. Last job before that was like 4 years chief commercial officer at one of our companies. Now, since 3 years, I run this partnering and innovation group for Deutsche Telekom. So, accomplishments. We have obviously, it's a huge company. We have a lot of partnerships. That's, I think, it's not a target to have a lot of partnerships. But we keep going to onboard new partners. And with that, we mean technology partners, vendor relationships, strategic partnerships, alliances, hardware partnerships, and so forth. So it's pretty broad. I think the notion that that this states here really is, we realized that we mustn't do everything ourselves. Instead, partnering becomes the new default, and that's very, very important for a company like ours, because in the war for talent, also in terms of the risk affinity, etc., we do kind of need to outsource these factors in order to be able to compete and not getting finally totally disrupted in the markets. Let me give you 3 examples, and I won't talk too much about the what we are doing, more about the how. Nonetheless, an example of our partnerships is the connected car partnership. So we have connectivity. We found a startup that runs a cloud platform for connected cars. So you put in a dongle in your car that's been produced after '97. And we have the SIM card in there, there's telemetry, and then you have a smart car, because we know where your car is and what's the problem, read error code, all these things. So good example of leveraging our technology with a partner who brings in the innovative platform, branding or co-branding it, leveraging our sales, our brand, et cetera, bringing this to the market. It's quite successful also here in the US. It's called Sync Up Drive. We have about a million connected cars already. Second, different kind of partnership is a technology partnership. So for those of you familiar, on the bridge eventually to 5G, there is something called mobile edge compute. So we want to bring compute power closer to the customer, so that it doesn't run through central data centers, but eventually through base stations, switches, or local, what they call cloudlets out there. And that gives the opportunity for a whole bunch of use cases, one of which is immersive experiences. And we partnered up here with a company called Niantic. They are responsible for the Pokemon Go game. And for them, it's very interesting, to have this huge data and real-time exchange between their data centers and the players for various reasons, one of which is multiplayer real-time gaming. Another one is to avoid location spoofing, because we can store data only in certain cloudlets, etc. So this is a very interesting partnership for us, because it's all in this search of how do we actually leverage and monetize our infrastructure. So this is a totally different kind, but we understand we need someone from outside who brings in an asset that brings our technology to what we call like monetization. Netflix partnerships is a classic one. Also, this content partnership operators, we do understand that content is a differentiator. So we understand ourselves as a content aggregator. Netflix is one of our many partners in these regards, where we put them on our set-top boxes, we bundle it in our tariffs, we eventually give the data for free and so forth. So it's a whole lot of very, very different partnerships that we run through. And secrets is like a big word for this, but I think there's a lot of experience that we put into this. I run this for 3 years, but we have this department for over 10 years now. And so there's quite some understanding of how this should be done. Is this like I have 40 seconds only? Is that correct? No? Okay. Secrets of success. So my team and me, we defined this kind of sweet spot. Where should we go for open innovation? And open innovation should happen in our understanding where a few things meet. One is obviously a priority topic for a business owner. Very important. It needs to be a priority. If it's only cool, that's not helping. Second thing that also needs to take place is that there is a lack of resource at the business owner. And the third thing is that you actually have a skill with a partner that gives a right to play in this particular field. So these three things need to work together. If it's only cool and you have a good partner, but it's not a priority, it will not work. And also, if the business owner doesn't feel he has a lack of resource in these regards, also there we couldn't find traction in our attempt. So that's one very important thing. The second thing is standardization. So we are 230,000 people. So I try to orchestrate a little bit partnering units, but we have more than 20 partnering units. Yeah? We are a pretty decentralized organization, and there's the guys in Hungary, and there's the guys in Netherlands, and so forth. So it's a little bit complicated. So what we came up with is what we call a partnering blueprint. So we standardized a process. We standardized a RACI. We standardized roles. It's like easier said, here's a business owner. But what's actually the role of a business owner? Some it's a nice thing or a corporate sponsor or whatever. But we really allocated responsibilities and tasks to these roles. And this is something that is a standard in our group. More so, we also introduced a toolbox. So what does that mean? Across these very fragmented units, we now have one Salesforce instance where we track our partners. And it's cruel, I think it's not like, and I don't know, there's Salesforce people here, the way you interact, but it's an amazingly powerful tool also. Because now I can see the funnel of all our interactions with partners. So from the first contact to the POC to the actual traction. And we leverage that now over the whole group. It's not fully implemented, but we have the instance and everybody complies to it. It's pretty awesome. We have one set of contracts now. It's very basic, but think of it. How many NDAs do you have in your corporation? How easy it is to get a local amendment or all these things. We now really built this. It's very basic work, but we built this repository of common standards, of contracts and negotiation forms, etc., that people just pull off, that are approved. There's one PSA process and privacy, especially in Europe, that's very important. So we have this whole process streamlined and standardized. So another thing that we learned, initially, and I think most of us have gone through this, we thought we own this, and they can be so grateful, and we own the IP and everything with the startups, especially with smaller partners. We understood we need to give up a part of our value chain. And more and more, we really totally intentionally do so. So what does that mean? That we are totally happy eventually, only get a smaller rev share. Also to co-own a customer. It's a very delicate thing. The customer ownership, I think, is eventually the most delicate thing. We do have the billing relationship, but who actually owns the customer? There's a lot of legal stuff with it. But for us, this understanding, no, we will not own everything in this value chain, but we give up on parts. I think that was a big step for us. Empower, find an internal champion. Honestly, what worked for us, it must not be always the super senior exec or whatever. I think middle management or even a great product manager can do the job. If she or he is enthusiastic about it and can, excite the surroundings, then that's totally fine. But internal champion is very crucial. Give project team a clear mandate. That's an obvious one. I don't need to talk about, but we really facilitated this, and I'll come to this in a second, with a kind of a tribe logic. So I don't know who followed Spotify. I think is also in the room. They were like the first who initiated that. But we really have this very matrix kind of build up for the innovation projects. And build experience, as said, we didn't start this just recently. We are in this for quite a while. What was the problem? And most of these things, or parts of these things, we really clarified. So one was, we have so many people in our organization, so that obviously, if you don't have this sunk cost logic understanding, you would think, okay, let's just utilize the resources. They're kind of for free, and if you know Central European labor law, you have those people, yeah? So it's not flexible. But this is a problem. This is where you start stopping innovation at the speed, because you think, let's just use what's there. No, we really progressed from inbuilt make default to quite a complicated phase where we had this make by partner, and we even had processes and gremiums around that. So we had like this matchmaking situation where there was a hopefully consolidated business demand on a topic. And then there were delivery options for this demand. One of which was, do it yourself. One of which was buying a partner, and one of which was partnering. So we had this kind of open play, which was only so open because the one who orchestrated this meeting was the guy who was responsible for utilization of the IT resources. So from this phase, we really moved now to a state where partnering is the default. So anyone who says, I can do this myself, needs to come up with a similar time to market and with a similar price than what we would get out in the market. And my team makes sure we have a great transparency in cooperation with all the VCs out there and other partners, that we have the great transparency, especially on our focus topics, that we have the best partner as a reference. Unclear roles of partners. We also had problems there because there was lots of misunderstanding that matches a little bit with the failed expectations of who is actually doing what. So are we doing integration, or do we co-coding? Are we responsible for go-to-market, or who's training the teams? All these things, unclear. And at the end of the day, you need to think through this whole value chain. And from my point of view, in terms of innovation, the biggest bottleneck still for us is sales capability. Yeah? So if you have the coolest thing, but you don't know who is selling it how, and how is it incentivized, and how does it play against other priorities, especially short-term ones, then it's not working. And failed expectation management, that's a very important one, because initially everything's like exciting, and you have this super high. We figured that in 80% of our partnerships, we did not like a quarterly kind of review really where we are actually, because you have so many excuses that are like legit, that you push things out. But this brutal expectation management, when do we want to achieve what? With the consequence to also outphase. Because think of it, how many partnerships have you actively stopped? Very few, at least in our case. So we now have this program that we have a very active outphasing as well once we don't meet those KPIs. So what's the future state? And that needs to be understood as what are we still working on in order to facilitate open innovation. So a challenge, especially if you're like a shareholder value driven, like cash flow oriented company, most of the targets are rather short term, and like kind of lagging indicators. So I believe for innovation buckets, you need to go all in. You need to overemphasize those innovation targets and have leading indicators on this. And this means there is no payback within 6 months. And that's easier said than done, especially for organizations like ours. So I believe for innovation topics, you need to have separate buckets and totally different KPIs who would have no payback in the short term. The second thing is, I mentioned it briefly, still there is loads of siloed approach. A version how we try to overcome this is now with, as I said, tribe logic. So the tribe leaders, as opposed to the functional leaders, they have at least an equal say. They report to their respective C-level superiors, and thus we try to overcome this. And there is more and more an abstraction of incentive scheme. That's a very interesting, risky thing. But we reduced individualization of targets. Yeah? Rather, aggregate the KPI set. It's a little bit, you could say, well, that's not really fostering individual strength. But we figured this is one approach to actually dissolve a little bit the silo issue. And last but not least, that's, I think, the very, very important one, is risk adversity. We need to learn, especially here also in Europe, from the United States, what it means to take a risk, to take the good thing out of, eventually also not being successful and learning quick out of it. This is a big progress for us and for our shareholders. The whole positioning of the European companies, they need to watch out that we don't get stuck in this super traditional, highly dividend-paid kind of, investments, but that we also can become growth companies. And for this, I believe the open innovation and engaging with the partner ecosystem is the secret sauce for us. Thank you very much. Here?
Sure. All right, I want to pick up right where you left off there. You're a very, very big company, and I don't think when people think of telecoms, they think of companies that are lagging behind the future. So I was wondering if you could speak just a little more to the risk that you see coming down the road for telecom in general, and then how the partnerships are meant to help avoid that, the risk that you guys face.
Right. I mean, it depends on whom you're talking to. If I talk to like a postal services company, they think that we are pretty progressive. If you talk to a blockchain company or mobility company, they think differently. So it's definitely challenging for us for many reasons. One of which is, how we're in this business for a long time. So even our IT systems, they're built up over time, and there's a new thing that is put on, etc. So for us, to implement change takes a very, very long time. So that's why it's very important that we build rather those, I would even call it like API layers to easily undock. So to build like an interface that takes care of all this legacy in the backup, and then focus on building this middle layer rather than on the end solution. And having the end solution by a partner easily to dock on. So that when we find a partner who does, I don't know, like say a cloud storage, he can dock onto our API layer and then be implemented in all our markets. So this is an approach to approach it. The other thing is obviously to spin it off, which is always a solution, but then you need to see that this is all an integrated culture, so I see some challenges there as well.
Sure. Now you guys talked you said 50 to 100 partnerships per year. So I went to journalism school so I could avoid math, but that's roughly 2 a week, yeah. It would seem. Walk me through the mindset of doing that many partnerships, and you talked about very early on that I thought was really interesting, the idea of, are we leaving anything on the table by doing a partnerships and not either directly investing or acquiring or building?
Yeah, so I mean, it's much or not. If you divide it by the number of employees, I think it's 10,000 employees per partnership. Okay. So there's a lot of people involved in this. But as said, for the make, buy, or build, the default now is to partner. Yeah, so if we look for a partner, also content or whatever, before we start the full production, obviously we look what can we actually aggregate and who's out there who could eventually be a differentiator.
Yeah, and so we were talking to Don, and the investment vision is very long. How long is the partnership vision? Are you guys signing partnerships that you think are going to be good for a year or a few, or is there partnerships that you think are paying off in 10 years?
Yeah, that's a very good point. So frankly, we do have labs, and they look into the very future stuff. My team's responsibility, we need to try to understand certain things. I wouldn't say that we ever will understand quantum compute, but we need definitely to understand blockchains. But our focus clearly is to partner with an impact on our P&Ls within 12 to 24 months. So rather short term, to be honest, than to engage in the total experimental stuff.
Yeah. Can you think of any instances, not ask you to name names, but times where you have done a partnership and then found yourself saying, well, now we want to go full into this. We're either going to start doing research, start doing investing. Is that kind of the decision funnel that it allows you to dip the toe in and see, does this make sense for us?
Yeah, totally. I mean, there's good and bad examples. Like a challenging example for us was the payment sector. There are good examples of telecom operators who have their payment services. For us, we built a company. We invested over $100 million in this. We thought we built this ourselves, and then the challenges start because the regulation challenges for us is different than for an OTT player and so forth. So we tried this, we built up a company, et cetera. We stopped this 2 years ago. Now, e.g., we partner with Braintree, a PayPal company that we implement in our app so that customers just can easily pay. So it's a good example where, we mustn't tap into every business to own the whole thing. Yeah, we should leverage our assets, and our assets are the connectivity, the trusted brand, the sales capability, and the billing capability. And that's already a lot. Yeah, that's a lot that also especially smaller entities can dream of. And we need to understand this, that we have something strong there and not only be super humble and discouraged, because all the fancy thing is happening outside.
Yeah. I mean, you guys get to do a lot more partnerships because you're not necessarily having to go through the arena of investing or acquiring, right? It allows you a much wider purview than, we sat up here talking for 20 minutes about one acquisition. Now we're talking about, you said 500 plus active? Yeah.
I mean, look, so we also have a VC arm. They're not here, so I can say that I don't believe in this ROI-based corporate venture fund business so much because, as I think it's been said before, even if you have a return of 15, 20 million a year, that doesn't do really anything. Instead, it's more about, strategic engagements. And there, yes, you can buy companies, and then you need to integrate them, which culturally is always, challenging. To take a small investment into a company, I also think that makes no sense. Instead, bringing together the assets and having a partnership, I think it's the most effective way. And also, it puts some emotion away that you would have if it comes to investing. Yeah? And it should be an eye-level thing. And, it's easy to say it here now, but at least we have this belief that it should be an eye-level thing also if we partner with a 15-people company.
Mm-hmm. When you guys look at partnerships, and you talked about how you tried to normalize some KPIs across everybody, but also empower people, that's a very interesting tension there. And I think something people can probably relate to in a lot of different kinds of jobs. But what about particularly with partnerships in kind of like a telecom space, in a technology space? Are there what's your favorite KPI if you have one?
Well, I don't know whether anyone has a favorite KPI. Look, I think, this lagging, I think order entry does make sense, which is it's tangible. What do you expect out of this? You have to quantify it. But I like relative KPIs. So I always think, if you're a telecom operator and you have a new business, say the cloud business, I believe, all the innovation buckets need to have a share because of the total revenues, e.g. Because you need to understand that the constitution of your revenues today will look different than in 5 years. So the overinvestment into those growing arms, it's so easily said, but this needs to be emphasized. So what worked for us is, to have a percentage of an innovation topic as a total of your value generation. So this is one KPI that we eventually look into. And we also do look into deal flow, so number of new POCs. Yeah.
For your partners?
Yes.
Okay, great. Talk to me about competition. How much do you watch what your competitors are partnering with and what they're doing and what they're investing in?
Yeah, look, I mean, overall, it's especially these old industries, it's crazy that, we try to destroy each other more than, to look what's going on. Actually, I think that's getting a little bit better. It is about harmonization of standards. It is about actually making sure that there is fiber to the home, and that we can deploy 5G in a meaningful way, and that we are the enablers for digitization. We try to do that less and less. Yeah, of course, in the heat of the classic price races, if there's a Christmas pricing, etc., it's still, because the consumers are also brutal, it depends on the market, but they're willing to change for $5 a month, at least in Europe. So you are in this race, and, depending on what kind of IPO or whatever stage companies are in, the quantity of their subscribers is a key KPI, unfortunately. Yeah.
In the spirit of some of that teamwork and the development of technology, have you guys entered into any, multi-way partnerships, not necessarily one-to-one, but, group situations where maybe competitors are part of that situation?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things. So one of the things that we engage with, also with OTT companies like Facebook or Intel, we are in this telecom infrastructure project that's very interesting. If you wouldn't think, but Facebook is very active in also supporting network development, because they're especially interested in developing countries, just to make sure that there is, enough connectivity to place their ads. But so we have these groups, these working groups, where we really try to bring in things together, and I really feel. For example, in the telecom infrastructure project, also in the GSMA, which is like the global platform, the spirit of guaranteeing best global connectivity, at least in the people that are involved there, is very relevant, much more so than eventually in the past. But nonetheless, consolidation always happens, so there's always something going on.
Sure. And then one of the last things I want to ask before we get to overrated, underrated, was talking about outphasing. So one of the nice things about partnerships, I suppose, is that it allows you to step out of them, or they usually have an end date. An investment, not necessarily, an acquisition, you hope that doesn't have an end date. Talk to me about the mindset of outphasing, how you guys try to, particularly with so many partnerships, decide when to say, this was great, but we've had enough.
Yeah, I mean, we had last year even, we had a partner which I was totally excited about. And it's a digital adoption platform. And so we introduced him to our business owners. And then we realized by the CEO, actually, that he met 150 people of Deutsche Telekom. And so we realized, wait a minute. So obviously, we think it's great, but somehow there is no adoption of this. So we try to start to give it like a number of attempts or a timeline until we realize that it's not going to happen. That's an initial thing. That's very important. In the aftermath, if you think that you don't meet any growth or any original business case, and it's really just taking the time, then you actively need to stop things. And we stopped quite a bit of things, honestly, which is hard for everyone who is responsible for a P&L. Because even the smallest partnership or our smallest product brings some revenues. It's not very popular. But we had also really the backing from the senior executive team that we can actually reduce partnerships also in order to empty up space. It needs quite some strategic mindset for him because it's hard to measure in the short term. Well,
yeah, off that, what capacity of your partnerships would you say are filled right now? Are you guys about at the brim, maybe looking to cut back, or do you guys see, room for more?
Yeah, I mean, I believe every manager has always felt perceived 100% or 110%. So we always need to bring in something that is better, where something else gets deprioritized.
Yeah. All right. Overrated, underrated. Real quick, so we only got a few minutes. Cord cutting.
What's that?
Cord cutting.
I didn't get it.
Cord cutting, like getting rid of cable.
Cord cutting. Sorry. So at some point, I think it's a little bit overrated because bandwidth demand is incredible. So I think we believe into, depends on the market, but obviously convergent technology has a relevance. But if I see, what's the cost also to serve a customer, then I believe that a mobile-only game can be very relevant. And we see this especially here in the US, that for not only urban, but also especially rural areas, cord cutting is definitely a solution that technology-wise makes sense, but also cost-wise.
Sure. This is more in the US than I think in Europe, but vertical integration.
So vertical integration sounds a little bit dangerous. If it means that we leverage our customer interaction and onboard technology to bring this to the customer together, then I think it's great. If we think we go into digital health and build our health platform, our health services, etc., then I don't believe in it.
5G.
Yeah, so 5G, this is now super hot, really. I mean, unfortunately, it was totally overrated until recently. So I don't know whoever was at the Mobile World Congress, either here in LA or in Barcelona. So that's been the topic for the last 5 years. Everybody's talking about it. And there's literally no relevant use case identified until recently. And now, as we are starting to deploy the technology, now it's a super hot time. And what we look into now is obviously all the low latency use cases. It's about network slicing. It's about massive IoT. It is about fixed wireless exit, and it's also about campus networks. I think this is one of the first applications, because in the B2B area, it's likelier to actually pay for the huge investments. But obviously, this is the next technology, and it will enable much more, also in terms of efficiency, than we've seen also from previous generations, even the steps of previous generations.
Great. And slightly related, last one, mobile video.
Mobile?
Mobile video.
Mobile video. Look, I think there's content and you consume it through your different displays. So I think if you want to watch an NBA game, you just want to watch it. You don't. The whole transmission and everything shouldn't be a topic for the customer. So here I'm with seamless experience for the customer. We need to worry about how we deliver that.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.